Hey, let's talk a little bit about another piece of business that made some headlines. We're once again talking about Bryan Danielson, but this time it was his interaction with Vince McMahon. Recently, Bryan has been abroad doing some promotional work for AEW's upcoming tour of Australia, and he was doing an interview where he was talking about the AEW debut. I want to give a shout out to wrestlingnews.co for their aggregation and transcription. This was an interview done with Nick Stave, I believe, and he was asked, what was the plan for him and Adam Cole to make their surprise debut? This goes back to All Out in 2021. If you'll recall, we saw Ruby Soho make her debut that day, and Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson all on the same show. And Danielson explained from his perspective that was far from a long-term plan, and he hadn't actually officially signed his contract until just a few days before the show. But when it came up how it ended with Vince McMahon, he gave the story. He said, I called Vince in early August because I was going back and forth, and I wanted to let him know I made my decision. I'm going to do this. He called me one time in the meantime and said, what if we offered you this instead? I hadn't signed my contract, but it was maybe 5 days before the pay-per-view, and he called me. I told him, sir, I already agreed to this thing. If I were to go back on this, I feel you have a decent amount of respect for me. One of the things you respect me for is that I honor my word. It was a great conversation. And he said, damn it, you're right. I think that's interesting to think that, it almost didn't happen, but Bryan was a man of his word and Vince respected that. I'm sure you had conversations like this when you were in talent relations. What can you tell us about when Vince would hear no, but it was for a principled reason? Did that strike him differently?
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit, Connie. It's, you gotta, your word is kind of your badge. It's your identification. It's important to keep your word and honor it. And if anybody in wrestling that I've been around ever is, just where your word is your bond, as they say. I know it's old school, but it's so important, especially in wrestling, because let's be honest about it. Wrestlers themselves have not always had that philosophy where their word is their bond, and it means more than one would maybe assume. So I'm a big believer of that, and like Bryan's one of those guys where if he says he's going to do something, or he says he's going to be someplace or do something, he does it, and that's not always the case in our crazy business. But he's the exception to the rule in that respect.
I think it's interesting when you take a look back at Vince's history. I think when Eddie Guerrero came back to the company in 2002, he honored all of his existing outstanding independent dates, and the company was still so high on him. He won the Intercontinental title fresh on his return to the WWE, but he was still working independent dates, and they allowed him to take the Intercontinental title with him. I know when we were doing Ric Flair's last match, they hired Jeff back as a vice president, and now he's technically going to be wrestling people who work for AEW. I mean, the night before that, he was a special guest referee at SummerSlam, and then he was able to work our event. So Vince has always been big on honoring your word and honoring your commitments. And there's a story out there, Jim, that I've never asked you about, and I want to ask you about here. The story is that Brian Lee would lose his fake Undertaker run in the WWF because allegedly he told Vince that he could leave Smoky Mountain Wrestling at the drop of a hat without notice whenever he wanted. And as the story goes, Vince felt like that was a case of, if you do that to someone else, why wouldn't I assume you do that to me?
Exactly.
And that was the end. Is that the way you remember that going down?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Vince is big on old school values, believe it or not. He's very, he can be unique in that respect. I still admire him for it, quite frankly. It's a good thing that he kept those traits and maintained them. So it's been good working for Vince was never a drudgery. It could be challenging because he's a perfectionist and he wants things to be right in his eyes. And he's got a right to do that because he's writing the checks and he's the owner. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of working with Vince. If he says he's going to do something, he does it. And I've always appreciated that, quite frankly, as a performer, as an administrator. It's just it's a necessary evil, if you want to say it that way. But his word is his bond, and it's always been that way. Sometimes you don't want to hear it. Sometimes it doesn't fit your schedule or your concepts or what have you. But he's a man of his word. And I think that's just great.
I do want to ask, was this, in your opinion, based on Vince's mood? Because this wasn't always the case. I mean, I think if we go back to 1984, and I realize that's a long, long time ago, you were on the other side of this. I think you were working with Mid-South when Junkyard Dog jumped and seemingly gave no notice. Was that just young Vince trying to take over the world, but once he was established, or was it different situationally or based on his mood? What can you tell us about that?
Well, mood has a lot to do with it, but his gut instincts is really what drives him. And so he's, like I said, we're wearing it out, but bottom line is that you just can't go wrong if you have a word that means something and you maintain it. So I think that this is a really key facet of Vince McMahon's personality, is that he kept his word. He was just you could depend on him for that, for sure. It may not be what you want to hear, but it's what it is. And I'd rather have it that way as to have surprises or him go back on his word. It's just it's old school in that respect, and I admire that.
When you were running talent relations, did you have a best practice? Let's say you were negotiating with someone and you wanted them to come in, but they did have other advertised dates. Was it an edict from Vince that they always finish, or is that something that you would say, hey, Vince, make a call?
No, basically, I wanted to make sure that the talent honored their word and honored their commitments. Because, like you said, if you'll do something negative, it bleeds over. It's a holdover, and it's just it's something that you got to deal with. I always wanted talents to maintain and their bookings. Like I said, that they're gonna, if you're gonna do that if you're gonna go back on your word for somebody else, you'll certainly go back on your word on this deal. So I never did like that. I like talents to maintain their commitments. Because you get in the habit of doing that, it just becomes habitual. If that makes any sense. It's important to have your word be your bond. And so for the most part, when you get a talent that's coming in and you can have those commitments, you can rely on them. You always want to know what kind of word your talent that you're hiring have, and are they going to be as straightforward and honest up front to you now as they are trying to come in and make a name for themselves. So I'm a big fan of maintaining your commitments. I think that's just imperative. It's important. You can't get around it. And if you get somebody that's that way, like Bryan Danielson, for example, he's going to keep his word. He's going to keep his commitments. And those are important assets to have as a talent.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Daryl. Came from Massachusetts and I moved to Wisconsin. And there's a lot of people that might be asking, why go with Conrad? Why go with Supreme Lending? And let me tell you something, brother. I think about the credentials, the tag team partner that I'd be working with. First of all, we got the podfather himself, Conrad. How can you go wrong with that? And then also go on to SaveWithEric.com, which, who who else could have kicked Vince's ass for 83 consecutive weeks? You can't beat that duo right there. But they did bring a secret weapon, and I didn't realize this because this was not advertised. I worked closely with Larry the Axe Thompson. And let me tell you, with all the stress with moving across the country with a large family that I have, it was reassuring to know that I had the enforcer at my back, handling questions from the other side of sellers, the other side with trying to find the right prices. He took care of all that. All I had to do was keep my eye on the prize and make it there to Wisconsin. They were absolutely fantastic. They checked in on me, especially Francis, very patient with me. I don't go through this process all the time, so I trusted the experts. I was able to call them. They called me if they had questions, and it felt like it was a personal arrangement. There was even a point in which, from the seller side, they wanted something else that wasn't part of the norm. Francis straight up told me, hey, we're loyal to you. We'll do whatever you want to do, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. They came through. I made it to the dream. I'm the champion of my own destiny here. They were able to help pave the way for me and my family. I couldn't be more happy with the results. I went from having less than an acre to now 20 acres worth of land. They made that dream a reality. I'm Daryl, and I'm living in Friendship, Wisconsin, in my dream home, thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.